The only real God is the one that you believe in. Start looking for the God in others. And if you find you're tuning into a wave, well then I don't know much about the NSA.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, friends.
Welcome into another episode of Spiritual Philosophy Chatter with the Joneses. I'm Danny Jones.
And I am Samantha Jones.
And here we are, episode 122.
122.
What's the topic?
This is the never-ending cycle of change.
Cool.
Yeah.
And isn't that the truth?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It is true.
Yeah.
In so many ways. So many ways.
Well, before we hop into that never-ending topic, anything you want to share from last week?
Yes, this just came in this morning. This is a message from one of our listeners, Beatrice. Now, I started crying, but I almost started crying. My eyes started tearing up when I read this the first time. So in order for this to be read on the air, you're going to have to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise, and we don't want to start the episode that way. Then I'm snotty the whole time.
Okay, just the top one?
No, you can read the whole thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Hello, my sweet friend. I am so very, very grateful to have found a connection with you. I thank my angels every day for having found your podcast. I cry tears of emotion and gratitude as I type this message. Thank you for this wonderful mission you have taken on, for guiding and being the voices of wisdom and encouragement many of us, especially highly sensitive people, need as we navigate our soul's journey. When you get a chance, please send me your information on how I can go about getting a reading from you. I've never had one, and I've been building up the courage to ask. I feel now that my soul really needs some guidance. Big hug, and I hope you are having a wonderful Sunday. That was very sweet, Beatrice. Thank you.
I didn't even make it through that with you reading it. Yeah, those are tough for me because they hit me because I realized that we are hitting people, touching people the way I was hoping.
Yeah.
So
it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, it is.
It's nice to, even if we weren't doing something, to get a nice message from somebody like that. Just,
absolutely.
Whatever the reason might be. But
yeah,
that's part of why we're here, is to reach out to each other. And that was nice.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Beatrice.
Very cool.
We really appreciate that. And so, I have talked to Beatrice, but for others that may want to get a reading by me, you can email me. That's probably the best way. My email is beyondthebridge11@gmail.com. Or you can go on Facebook and look me up there, Samantha Jones, Psychic Medium. I think if you do @beyondthebridge11, if you search that way, you'll find me, and then you can just message me there, and we can set it up for you that way.
Very cool.
So, yay.
Very nice.
So thank you for that message again, Beatrice.
Yeah.
And then every week we do 2 questions that our listeners ask. We answer these questions. And so the first one this week comes from Ashley. And she asked, what is your favorite manifestation technique? I thought that's a really good question. I have a lot of techniques. Do you want to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. You know what? I think that the key to any manifestation technique, no matter how you do it, is believing that you're doing it.
Yeah.
So that's where I start. If I'm in my own head and I don't believe that what I'm trying to manifest, that I can actually do it at that time, that I really believe it, then I just won't do it.
Yeah.
But the universe does know what you need, even by they just read your mind. They just know.
Right.
So they know what you need inside more than you know.
Yeah.
So when you ask for something, it's usually them, finally going, oh, okay,
Right.
She's manifesting this and we're going to give this. But yes, belief is the number one thing about manifestation. For me, I'm usually really simple now in my technique because I realize that it doesn't have to be some fancy drawn out thing, that you can just ask the universe for what you want and leave it at that.
Right.
But the thing is you have to be, not just, like I said, believe in it, but it has to be selfless. It has to be something that is for the greater good. There can't be anything about hurting other people. If you like trying to manifest money, but you're like, oh, I wish I could, get money from this person because they owe me money, but that might hurt the other person.
Right.
You're trying to manifest something that's not good. It's not for the greater good. So the universe doesn't want to give that to you.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's, something too you have to remember there.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about the technique as it is what's in your heart,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That was the first thing that popped in my head about it was, first and foremost, what is it that I'm really seeking? And being very clear is that the universe can see right through my BS. Okay.
Through all of us. Yes.
What right up front, what am I asking for? Is it something I really need?
Right.
Or is it something I really want?
Right.
Okay. There's no shame in wanting something. Yeah. Even if you want something that's considered a finer thing in life to obtain.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
So that's my first question to myself before I kind of go in front of them and present this.
Yeah.
Is what am I really seeking out of this? The second thing would, God, this is kind of a tough one. The second would be, am I willing to put in the work?
Yes.
For this. Okay. So when I talk about manifestation in my life, I'm not in my mind picturing a genie lamp and rubbing that genie lamp and this genie pops out and grants me 3 wishes that I don't have to do a damn thing for.
Right.
That's not how I view it.
That's not how manifestation works, though.
Right. So I'm asking myself, am I willing to put in the sacrifice and the work for whatever it is I'm asking for that I need or want? And is that need or want coming from a pure intention? Because again, they're going to see right through it.
Absolutely.
And then the other one is I'll sit in times and close my eyes, or maybe not even close my eyes, but let myself drift.
Right.
And daydream.
Yes.
And let myself dream of what it would look like.
Yes. Absolutely.
This event or this thing or this reaction that I'm seeking from somebody, whatever it is that I'm trying to manifest, trying to envision what that would feel like. And often it comes with emotion, which for me tells me I'm on the right track. If the emotion comes along with it, then I am on the right track. If it's more just like,
yeah,
whatever.
True.
Then I think maybe the odds of it happening may not be. But that just is my own kind of personal cues.
Yeah.
For it.
We all have our own ways. Another way, like when we were trying to manifest this house, what we did is we made a list. We have very, very specific list of the things that we wanted in this house. And let me tell you what, the universe was, they took things that we said very literally and like things that I was like, no way that they could do that. Even things that I thought in my head would be cool that I didn't put on this list. But make a list, and it's okay. Like, you're not being greedy. You're asking for what you want. But like Danny said, you have to be willing to give back, whether that's putting in the work for, whatever it is. Like, for me, it's giving back a lot. Like, I give a lot of my time. I donate. There's a lot of things that I do to make the world a better place. And that's why a lot of my manifestations happen. But so it's okay for me and everybody else to be very specific about what you want to manifest, as long as you're putting in, like you said, the work and the effort and whatever it is that you have to give back. Right. It's give and take. You can't just take. Right. The universe isn't just going to be like, oh, here, take it, take it.
You have to look at it as whether we give them the credit or not, it's them definitely helping us.
Oh, so yeah.
They don't want to tag their name to something that isn't pure or worth a dang, if I could put it in a simple term. Like, they're going to get behind something and push something that is of what you're speaking, that type of nature. They're going to get behind that, and you will see the rewards for that. Not because that's what you're seeking. That just happens to be the after effect of what it is you're doing.
Absolutely. And if you want to know ways to fast track your manifestations, that's by doing good. By doing good deeds, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be giving money. It can be giving time. Whatever it is, that's a fast way to fast track your manifestations. Because the universe likes that. It's a bonus.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that question, Ashley. I really like that, and we
one.
will send
Thanks,
you your
Ashley.
free merch. And then the second question is from Patricia. She asked, are animals easier to communicate with telepathically than people? And although you're not an animal communicator, I'm sure you have an opinion on this too, because you can talk to the animals. You may not hear them back, but you can talk to them, but we cannot have a telepathic communication. I mean, there's sometimes that I feel like, you'll hear things that I'm thinking and vice versa, or maybe we are like telepathically talking. But if I try to do it like from across the house or something, like, bring me my slippers or whatever, you know what I mean? No, it doesn't work. But
I heard you.
But you know what? Yeah. You funny guy. But we can be sitting outside and I can call one of these dogs that's inside to come out and they will.
Yeah.
So it is much easier to telepathically communicate with animals. And the reason for that is because animals are so pure and they're so willing to open up to us and talk to us telepathically, where humans are so shut down and we don't know how to do it. Like, really, I don't know how to telepathically communicate with a human. I can telepathically communicate with animals and the universe and spirits, but the hardest one is with other people.
Yeah.
It fits into a different category than the psychic because it takes two sides. It takes one person to communicate and one to listen, and vice versa.
Yeah, if you're communicating with a spirit, I wouldn't say it's as difficult as that. That's for sure.
Yeah, no.
I don't know even how that ranks for you. Like, is it easier to communicate with a spirit as opposed to an animal telepathically, or vice versa?
Animals are easier, but that's probably because I've been doing it for so long. But they're also spirits. I don't want to say they like to play games, but I think sometimes they're like, oh, like charades. First word, 2 syllables.
But animals also use imagery,
They do, yes.
so it's similar. But I think you can hear humans. Can't you hear, not humans, spirits that were humans? Can't you hear them clearer than? I thought you hear more conversationals than you do with animals. Animals, I thought, was more imagery for you.
It really depends on the spirit themselves.
Got it.
Really. But, like, if you ask me, like, what's easiest, like, first thing in the morning, if I have a reading, the hardest readings for me to do are the spirit readings. Like, if I book those in the morning, I'm like, oh, what'd you do that for? Right. The psychic are the easiest. I don't really know why, but I just look at it as probably, the spirits, they communicate in different ways. And they, like, animals are really open to you asking questions. So, like, when I get a client that asks me, what was the dog's favorite toy? The animal is really open to showing me that favorite toy. But the human spirits are a lot of times like, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this. And I'm like, dude, they want validation. Like, give me no, not till you deliver my message. So they're a little bit more stubborn in my eyes,
Everything comes at a cost.
It does, yeah.
Even if it's not monetary.
Yeah, it does. So animals are, all around for me. But you know what? That's me. There may be other mediums that are like, I know there are, that are like, I can't talk to animals at all.
Yeah.
So it's everybody's different, But we might all agree that telepathy with humans is tough.
What the opposite for me about that is that I know that I can communicate with the dogs. I know that they hear me because they'll do often what I'm sharing with them.
Yeah.
As well as where I can't hear them, right? I can't hear them back.
Yeah.
But the messages that I've received from the other side are very clear, distinct, what I would consider like audible voices in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which sounds like me,
right.
Like a thought.
Right.
But it's a very clear, distinct statement, command, observation, whatever it is, I hear it very clear.
Yes. Yeah, it's different with the animals.
Yeah.
Like when Sabbath is trying to get a point across to me, typically it's one word. And it usually will be very vague, So, yeah, it's very different. And you will hear it differently in your head, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of people ask me to, like, teach this stuff, like mediumship and animal communication. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. Like, I don't know how to teach it. I have a hard time even explaining at this point how things are different and how animals communicate differently from spirits and how the psychic feels different. Like, I could honestly sit here with a psychic reading and just go and like give a message, a really long message that keeps coming and keeps coming. But it's not always that way with animals and spirits. Like, spirits, a lot of times they get to a point and then they're like, next, move on. You know, it's just very strange. So I don't really know how to teach it because I don't really know.
Well, not to say that one day you won't
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
have a greater understanding of sort of it all in a synopsis. I don't know.
I look forward to that. I tell you that. I look forward to, like, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, what are my abilities going to be like? Because they grow more and more every day. So they're going to continue to do that. And so who knows what's coming next.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you, Patricia, for that question. And that's all we have from last week.
Go. All right, then. Well, episode 122, The Never-Ending Cycle of Change.
This was an interesting episode for me to put together because I lost myself in it many times. It was hard. When I had the idea, it was like an epiphany. We were having like one of our deep talks, and I was hearing not just you, but whatever spirits on the other side. That happens a lot. It's almost like you're having a conversation with all of us. And so I hear their input on this, right? And so I asked them questions and whatever. And we were talking about how, like, we're taught by society certain things and we stick to it, even though we don't know why we stick to it. Okay. So let me give you an example of what made me think of this the most is that we started talking about microdosing hallucinogenics. This is becoming legal in several places, and California will probably be next. And I have had visions of us doing this. And so I know that it's going to happen. Right. But for me, I still, even though, you know, I'm spiritual and I get everything happens for a reason, I still go to, is that okay? Is it okay for me to do that? Like, are my loved ones going to be looking down on me, frowning? Like, okay, why are you doing it? Like, one of the things that we know about microdosing hallucinogenics is it's good for anxiety and depression. So what I was getting from it is, why is it okay for you to take Wellbutrin, which is a synthetic antidepressant, but it's not okay for you to microdose something that grows in the earth? Literally something that comes from the earth as opposed to something that's made in a lab. Right. So I started questioning this, and I was like, you're right. Why? Why do I think that it's not okay to do that, but it's okay to take the Wellbutrin? Right. Not that it's not okay to do one or the other, but what is the healthier alternative for my body? Would probably be the microdosing, to be really honest. But because of what we've been taught that's not okay. Right. We have to take these medications that are made in a lab and prescribed by a doctor. Why? Right. Because that's what society has taught us. Right. So then I started thinking about history and how things kind of seem to repeat themselves while teaching us lots of lessons, okay? And going back in time, there are a lot of different drugs that were legal in, like, even in the 1800s. Like, cocaine was legal. Like, here, I got some notes here for you. Yeah. Cocaine was legal and used to treat many things, including allergies and stuffy nose. Comes from the leaves of a cocoa plant, so it's natural. This is one of the oldest cultivated plants in South America. Until 1903, Coca-Cola used it in their soda. That was its caffeine, before caffeine. Yeah. But it became illegal in 1914 under the Harrison Narcotic Act. Why? Because it was highly addictive. Okay. Right. Well, there's probably way more reason as to why, you know, I didn't get deep into the research on this, but that is one of the main things that they said. But if that's the case, then why wasn't alcohol banned? Because alcohol is just as highly addictive. Why weren't cigarettes banned? Because cigarettes are just as highly addictive. To me, I look at it as like we're trying to be repressed. Because they know that when you do things like psychedelics, or I've never done any of this, so I don't really know if cocaine opens your mind or whatever. But when you're using these natural things, they don't have control as much, and they can't. It's the money, it's the greed, it's the politics, it's all of this stuff behind it that we've been taught wrong. Right. You know. Yeah, there's so much. I mean,
even when you look at death rates and attributed to alcoholism and cigarettes, it's much higher than cocaine.
Right.
You know, I'm not like an advocate for cocaine. I don't do it. So I've done it in the past. It's not what you would consider a mind-opening drug, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But I have to look at the people that cultivate these bushes out there. You know, these native Colombians and whoever else is cultivating it. They're often chomping on the leaves all day long while they're working.
Yep.
This is a part of their lifestyle.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Also, some of the things that were taught to them through generation and generation and generation, it probably does help them with their energy. You know, when they're out there all day long, they're probably out there long hours a day. But, and then there's, you know, other things that, you know, have been introduced, like in this, it's kind of off that, but like Hitler was using methamphetamines for his fighter pilots.
Really?
To fly over the Atlantic.
Wow.
You know,
That's
so
wild.
Because they were anticipating to come here and invade.
Right.
So he was like, how do I keep these guys awake for such a long flight?
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Another one of these, though, is caffeine. Like, why is caffeine legal and these other ones aren't, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's really about, like, control, right? But we're also starting to open ourselves up to this stuff. Mm-hmm. We're starting to open more. So I look at the cycle of change from, you know, 100, 200 year spans, kind of. How do things change? Even when we talk about like psychic work, okay, this is something that was really used a lot and then it was frowned upon. And then it was used a lot and then it was frowned upon. Nostradamus was terrified of being found out that he was a seer because he was afraid for his life. But then you go to like the 1800s and they used Ouija boards and automatic writing to communicate with the dead. Mm-hmm. Then we move on to like, I think it was like the 1920s or so, and all of these things start to become occult products and it's devil worshiping, you know? So, and now though, we're getting back to, maybe this isn't as bad as we thought it was. You know, we're seeing more stores selling different things related to tarot or just psychic in general. And that's really cool. That's eye-opening. So we can see that there is this cycle that it like comes and goes. Right. It's like a roller coaster. You know, sometimes things are really good and sometimes they're really bad. And sometimes our views are very conservative and sometimes they're very liberal. And it's just a constant cycle in everything.
Right. I honestly have to wonder in this kind of cycle we're talking about, whether it's, you know, every 100 years or every close to that or something, that we see things repeating themselves and happening, or maybe flip-flops and decisions on a global scale or a government scale. Right. And I have to ask myself, you know, what is the involvement in corporation? And the relationship between government and corporation to influence society's opinions about things and the way things shift.
Right. Absolutely. Let's look at something else that shifts constantly, that goes in cycles of being accepted and not accepted, and that's homosexuality. Mm-hmm. When I did this research, I found it very interesting to read that in ancient Greece, a very common type of relationship, as weird as it may seem to us, was young boys with adult men. And these young boys would date the adult men until they were of adult age, and then the roles would reverse. They would find themselves a younger man. In our society today, this is considered illegal. Yeah. So, but who are we to say in their society that wasn't okay? This is what we've been taught. In my eyes, this is wrong, absolutely. But that was okay in their time. Why is it wrong in my eyes? Because that's what society has taught me. Right. You know, is that something that a conclusion I would have come to on my own that that's wrong? Maybe. I don't know. Right. I don't know because I know what society taught me. But we have these kinds of feelings because of the generations involved and their beliefs and all of that.
A good way for me to wrap my head around that is, and I said this to you earlier, was like to imagine how my father and mother would have raised me if it were now.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Like if I was born now.
Yep.
And how would I raise, or how would we raise Marina if she was born then?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And thinking about those influences of society and culture and whatnot that are kind of weighing down on you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Also, like when we go back to like Egyptian times, okay, and even in America, these are like before the European colonization. These are times when homosexuality was pretty much, I don't want to say okay, but it was more acceptable then than it was like, say, the 50s, 60s, you know, when our parents were kids, or, you know, like the boomers age.
Right.
It was way more acceptable then. Even as much as like conforming to gender roles and like non-binary. Mm-hmm. Like in Egypt, they consider the non-binary, you know, right, as a third sex. So we somewhere along the lines were taught that that's not okay.
Right.
And a lot of times in these, religion is thrown in. You know, Jesus wouldn't like that. Mm-hmm. Jesus didn't like homosexuals. Okay, but why? It doesn't say that in the Bible, first of all. But then if that is true, why isn't every single generation consistent? Why is it constantly changing? Right. You know, we interpret the Bible our own ways, mm-hmm, and a lot of these things that right now are interpreted are not the correct ways, you know?
Right.
And so maybe in earlier interpretations, they didn't read that because that wasn't in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are all things that we've created. Our societies have created this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of just feel like, you know, again, and I don't know if this has to do with corporations getting involved, but somewhere about like the early 1900s that there was this shift from a more open-minded approach to a different thing.
Yeah.
And so, and during that period, you look at, like you were talking about, how certain controlled substances today were legal then. And you could say, okay, so marijuana was legal up until about 1936 or something like that. And mm-hmm, then prohibition was, alcohol was legal, mm-hmm, marijuana was illegal.
Right.
And then within maybe 10 years of each other, if that,
right,
they flop.
Right.
One becomes illegal and the other one becomes legal.
Right.
So I wonder, what was that all about?
Right. Exactly.
So it's just strange. And
right,
now we're looking at this day and age now where, and if we compare our statistics as a country to other countries about drug abuse and crimes and imprisonments and sentence times and reoccurring crimes and reoccurring prison sentences,
right, compared
to other countries that don't kind of keep it under lock and key as much as America has.
Right. That
old tale of, like, you don't put wave a candy in front of a kid's face and tell him don't eat it.
Right.
You're going to kind of essentially create a monster.
For sure.
So that's kind of one analogy that I look at this and think, well, why this shift? And I feel like as a society right now, we think we're the most smart and technologically advanced than we've ever been.
Yeah, we do.
I completely disagree with that.
Too.
I completely disagree with that. Yeah. I believe that there has been previous civilizations, including Egyptians and Atlantis, and probably even before that, where there was technological advancements that we couldn't even fathom right now. And there was this ability to open our minds and connect to our Creator on such a greater level than we can do now. And there was also this ability to communicate telepathically very long distances, surely based on the fact that that's how each one of us at that time were raised.
Right, exactly.
To believe that this is all possible. It's all part of the physical world.
That's right.
So that was wiped out because those advancements were starting to be taken advantage of.
Right.
People were using them for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And then, therefore, you've got trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So it has to be wiped out, because who's left over from ancient Egypt and Atlantis that can speak for the people of the time and what the issues were? And nobody.
Right. Yeah.
It has to be like erased.
Exactly.
Almost essentially erased or buried until we come along and start uncovering it again by our own sure desire for the knowledge.
What you're talking about is also a part of the simultaneous time theory.
Yeah.
About how you can only get so far advanced in technology. Not simultaneous time, but multi-universes. Because you can only get so far in technology and then it starts over, is what like a lot of them say that I've heard. So yeah, it's the same kind of theory. You get to this point where you just can't get any more technologically advanced. And, whether they're wiped out or whatever the case may be, you start over. It's a cycle.
Right.
It's always a cycle. Even climate change, as much as we hate to say it, it is a cycle. There's ice age too. We just happen to be going through the hot part of
Just so much
change.
of the past has been erased, we have nothing to base it off of. So
Exactly.
when someone says the Wright brothers invented flying, no, they
No,
didn't.
yeah.
No, they didn't.
And we think they did
Right.
for our
Right. For that time.
for our era, yeah.
But no, they didn't invent flying.
No.
If we look up in the sky, there's things flying all the time that are of not our making. And so that's been around for God knows how long. Thousands, if not the beginning of the creation of all this.
Yeah.
So I don't buy that. I don't discredit these gentlemen for coming along and showing the world we can do this.
Yeah.
We can, but they didn't invent it.
Right.
No.
No. Yeah. But that's a whole other story. You had said something about, being raised with beliefs inside of like the generations. And that's a big part too of like what I put together for this episode. Because honestly, like there are so many cycles within the generations. We don't even really notice it. Like I didn't notice it when I was a kid. I notice it way more now, but, like, for example, we start with being a child, okay? And if we complete the whole cycle of life, we grow to be an elderly person. And during this cycle of life, we see how each generation, or not, maybe not the generation, but like that age range, we look back and we go, oh, wow. We think about, when we were that age, when, so it's a cycle. It's about, changing also what we didn't like from the past. And, we've talked about this a lot, things that our parents did, things that other generations did. And this is where a lot of our growth is right now, I think, in society, but also within our generational cycles, is that we are starting to be more open-minded. And it's like, for me, there's a lot of things that like, I think back when I encounter things with Marina that I think, how would my mom have reacted to this when I was her age?
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to react like that. I want to learn. I want to react differently. I want to react better. I want to react in modern times. So let me give you an example of this. The boomers still are number one divorce rate, okay, of all the generations so far. But the traditionalists, which are the generation before them, they did not believe in divorce at all.
No.
So let's say that a boomer goes to their traditionalist parents and said, I want to divorce my spouse. And the traditionalist parents are like, you divorce your spouse over my dead body, whatever, because that's what they believe. Or the person doesn't even divorce the spouse because of, their parents' belief or whatever.
Right.
Now, when the boomer is the parent, and they have a child that is Gen X like us, or a millennial, and that child comes to them and says, I would like to divorce my spouse. What are your thoughts on this? How's the parent going to react? Are they going to react the way their traditionalist parents acted?
Right.
And are they going to be, no, you can't do that? Or are they going to look back to when they faced the problem and think about how they would have wanted their parents to handle it? So for me, I see these cycles like that, and I want to break them and make them better. And I think that's a big part of what we're here and what the universe wants us to do.
But a lot of this has to be repeated, for us to learn. And just when you were talking at the beginning about starting as a baby and then we go through this cycle and we end up as an elderly person, that alone, when you look at that, we sort of end up not exactly, but pretty close to how we started.
Oh, yeah.
The only difference is we're just bigger.
Yeah.
But we are incapable to take care of ourselves. We need help, whether it's eating, going to the bathroom, bathing, wearing diapers. This is part of each one of our natural cycles.
Right, exactly.
So as we're each going through, and like you said this earlier, about every 10 years, and I would agree with that, somewhere between 5 and 10 years, there's a significant change in my own personal life and in my own consciousness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And at the same time, just like we've talked about this before, that life is meant to have hills and valleys, so we appreciate these emotions. Yeah, there are things that are like depression and that can hinder us and that we can somehow control with the help of certain medications or practices that we may do. But just like our own personal journey of these hills and valleys and the cycles of change and things sort of maybe reoccurring in our lives for a reason there to teach us something, this is happening on a bigger scale at the same time.
Yeah.
With society and global consciousness.
Yeah.
And the way we're going up and down and up and down. But we're still moving.
Right.
We're still evolving as a species. But we are revisiting things for a reason.
Yes.
And so then sometimes that pops in my head. It's like, okay, so when the next Third World War starts up, what are we going to do different?
Yes. That really is it. What are we going to do different? The universe wants to know. What are you going to do different as a society, as a generation, and as an individual? That's really, yeah, absolutely. I was kind of telling you earlier that I feel like every generation has to face certain things because this is how we learn. Like, for example, there's been a major pandemic every 100 years. And I feel like maybe that's because at some point in our lives, we're supposed to experience this at some degree. Because it shows a lot of character, to be really honest, how somebody handles a pandemic, it shows a lot of character. I have learned a lot about a lot of people over this. And I think that the universe does that for a reason. They want to see, what is the most important thing to you? Yourself?
I agree. Yeah.
Or your family and society? Or what is more important? And so it is all a test. And so I feel like there's just certain things that we face. And a lot of people want to look at this as God doing bad. Why would God bring us pandemics? Why would God kill off all these people? Why would 9/11 happen if there was a God? Well, because this is where we learn.
Yeah.
And all of these things that we look at as bad and as like, there's a lot of people obviously that have died from coronavirus, but it really depends on how you look at it too. As if you look at it from the universe's point of view, that this is more of a mass exit and it's like a changing of souls than anything else. And that has to happen every so often. It just does. And that's what's happening right now. Yeah. So every 100 years when we have these pandemics, it's not God going, oh, I'm going to kill off all these people. No. But it's souls that are given the chance to leave for one reason or another. And a lot of them may not make sense to us as humans here, but it makes sense on the other side.
Sure.
We've lost a lot of elderly people in this time. And that sucks a lot for a lot of families. But for those people, that was a part of their contract, and there's a reason why.
Yeah, I agree.
So even those things like a pandemic that look like they're a bad thing every 100 years, they have a purpose. Even war has a purpose. And like you said, I think that one of the things about war is, how are we going to handle it? What are we going to do when we're faced with these similar kinds of things that we've been faced with before? If we get hit by another terrorist attack like 9/11, are we going to respond the same exact way that we did last time, which put us in a 20-year-long occupancy in Afghanistan?
No.
Or are we going to do something different?
Right.
That's the cycle.
And that's not the first time that we occupy every country we do that
yeah.
with. And maybe there's something to be learned by that.
Yes.
It's like, why are we occupying? I don't
Absolutely.
know. That's just a question, but
you had mentioned the personal cycle too, and how things seem to change for most of us every 5-10 years. You know, I had done a little bit of research on this, and some of the websites said, oh, 7 years, it's 7 years every time. No, I think it very much ranges for each person. I think we all have a cycle, even if we don't see it. For me, I can see it. I can see how every 10 years there's a major shift in my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I haven't talked to a lot of people about this. We've talked about it, but I would love if any of our listeners understand what we're talking about and have been through this, that they see that their life happens in different cycles. I'd love to hear your stories, but let me explain just a little bit about what I mean. Mm-hmm. And that is like, okay, so 2010, I started going through a divorce, and I went through that basically like the whole cycle of the relationship was like 10 years, because I got a divorce, I dated, I lived single, blah, 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 went through all this stuff, reconnected with you, got remarried to you, the whole cycle happened in 10 years. And then in 2020, my career changed suddenly. And I was, because of coronavirus, had to switch very quickly from one career to another. So now here I am in this decade learning about this new career and building my career. Mm-hmm. And I anticipate that by the end of this decade, this cycle will be over and my career will be stable or whatever. Right. And I will start over and with something different in 9 years from now. That's what I noticed with my life. I don't know if that's the way it works for everybody, but I think that if you look at hard enough at your life, you'll see that there are cycles like this that happen every so often. And these cycles are meant to push us on to what we need to be doing, Yeah. It's like, well, especially if you're stuck, if you're like not getting anywhere, these cycles need to push us along, I agree. So they're very normal. And like one of the things that I get the most with clients is like they don't like change. Like nobody really likes change, and change is very uncomfortable. My divorce, very uncomfortable. Yeah. My career change, very uncomfortable. It still sometimes is. But where would I be if I wouldn't have taken the risk and gone with those things, So that's why change is so important. And that's why in these cycles, breaking the cycle and making change is so important.
It's inevitable. I mean, it's just, whether it's geologically, or internally as a species, it's all changing.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day, it's little bits that you can't see, but you get back from it, and we can see.
Yeah.
That everything down to the earth we walk on is changing and evolving as much as we are, and aging and going through that, that process. We can't avoid it. And most of us are scared of that. However, I think most of us, if we really asked ourselves, would you really want your life to stay the same way for its entirety?
Yeah.
That would be so boring.
So boring.
And monotonous.
Yeah.
So, with the happiness and the sadness and the challenges and the obstacles comes change.
Yep. And it's all normal. Right. It is all perfectly normal. Like, seriously, like this point in my cycle of being like an adult, I trip out the most on it, I think, than I ever have at this age. And that is because I can see so much of my past and my childhood and having a teenager and going through that. You see the cycles repeating like within the generations and those, like my mom had this nightgown, or maybe it was a shirt when I was little, and it said, "It's official, I've become my mother." And I never understood it. And I always used to tell her, that's a stupid shirt. Like, why do you wear that? And she would always tell me, you'll understand when you're older. And it's a part of the cycle that we do understand when we're older, because we're faced with the same things just in different ways. And that's how we learn. That's a part of the cycle, the generational cycles. Yeah. It's easy for us to get frustrated too with like other generations. Like I think, especially like Gen Z and the millennials, they get really frustrated with the boomers. Right. But it's really important for us to all understand that we all do go through our own cycles, and we all are taught our own things. And so we have to learn to kind of respect those other generations' beliefs and what they've been through. I have this, I don't know if you saw this, what's sitting here. This is 11 pages of descriptions of the differences between the generations, not including Gen Z. Wow. This is just the traditionalists and the boomers and our generation, which is Gen X and the millennials. And the differences between them is astounding. It really is. Like, the boomers are really into working. Like, you know, work comes first. And then that seems to be changing a lot, you know. The younger generations, they're understanding more that working from home and having a family at the same time and doing all these things is more important than work. But you can't make the two generations understand that.
No, but they can learn from each other.
Yes, they can. They can learn. But you can't force things on them, you know, and we have to be tolerant of each other's differences because there are reasons for these differences.
There is, and I think that there's kind of this farce going on in society that says the newest generation is always the best generation.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can fully agree with that. I think that every generation is different, and they could all learn from each other.
Yes.
You know, the good and the bad, taking that all in consideration, that you could learn. But I can't say that, well, the boomers are not as good of a generation as Gen X, as us, right?
Yeah, you can't really compare. It's apples and oranges.
It's different.
Yeah.
Did they make mistakes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Gen X make mistakes? Yeah.
Of course.
Gen Z, all of them. They will. But I think that's why there is this gap, this separation. It feels like there's a divide.
Yeah.
Between that is that's allowing us to get perspective.
Right. I think that that's one thing that the universe really wants us to do when it comes to these generational cycles and stuff is they want us to stop and look at things and make decisions for ourselves. Think with what feels right instead of thinking with what you think, you know, that generation before you is going to do. My grandmother was a very conservative woman, very conservative. And she was a traditionalist. She was in that generation, okay? But at the same time, like, she never made me feel bad about, like, the stuff that my generation did. Like, she didn't like my tattoos, you know? But she wasn't, like, upset about them. Like, she didn't take it personally and get all, like, freaked out by it, you know? And, like, with clothes, she wasn't like, oh, you can't wear that because, you know, it's too revealing or whatever. Because she understood the generational gap. And I always respected that. And so I try and be like that myself. That I don't maybe understand all of what Marina wears or what she listens to or what her thought process is. But I have learned that that's okay. That that's her. And each child is their own individual. And each adult is their own individual. You know?
Totally.
Yeah. I think that's where we can learn a lot from each other and from the universe.
For sure. It's... You know, it's like, as an analogy, I can't tell you how long the bumblebee is as long as I have it under the microscope. I have to take it out and get a little perspective to give you an idea of, like, okay, that's about a half inch.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at it under the microscope, I can't get that good of a perspective on it.
Right.
When it's that up close. I need a little distance.
Yes.
To give you my true guesstimation.
Yes.
So that's like how I perceive this, is that gap and the difference between those generations, how my dad and I have completely different interests in a lot of ways, but then we have similar things too.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember that we all have our differences and our similarities, you know, and that's what makes us individuals and that's what makes life interesting and, you know, but I think as far as, like, the cycles go and why I felt the need to do this episode was really because I think the universe wanted to say we're supposed to make these cycles better. We're supposed to not regress. That is really, like, our job here is to continue to grow as a society and not make these backward movements, you know? So they want, with each generation, for us to open up more and more and to understand that we really are the ones that make the decisions for ourselves. Right. And what we think and what we feel, we have to be open to that and, you know, not let people tell us, you know, what to believe and not to believe, because that's what's going to make us better as a society. Right. Not allowing different generations to tell us what to believe in this generation when that's done. That's gone. You know, it's that ship has sailed. You know what I mean? But again, it's all just a cycle, and it will probably, once we're all gone, who knows? It'll repeat itself probably right back to where it was before.
Probably.
But, one can hope and dream that we can make some serious changes in, these couple generations and not regress. But that's the cycle.
Yeah.
So.
But you got to wonder, too, it's like in 100 years when everybody here is gone, will these things still get brought out just to see what the new batch of souls, how they react?
I would question that, yeah.
Like, why is there a pandemic every 100 years?
Right,
And
exactly.
Why is this flip-flopping every 50 years or every 10 years? There's definitely something to be learned.
Absolutely.
Whether it's your first time or not, I think because there's so many more souls than there are bodies to incarnate into, we have to do this over and over again because it's school.
That's right. That's absolutely
so
right.
Just because, the class of 1979 took English and they all passed with, flying stars doesn't mean that the next year doesn't have to take English.
That's true. Yep.
So.
And just because we kind of failed this pandemic doesn't mean we'll fail the next one. At least I hope not.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Change in cycles.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Cool.
So.
Well, that was good.
Yeah.
It's a little, we could go on and I could give
Yeah.
so many comparisons to things and.
Yeah.
And you did say that, did you mention the book that was written kind of about this in the 90s? But this theory about they're saying every 10 years?
Every 80 years.
80 years,
is what they're saying.
Okay.
And I didn't write a lot of it down because, to be honest, it really confused me. But it's called The Fourth Turning. And basically, the gist behind it is every 20 years has a different theme to it, okay? And it's like, I don't even remember, but it's like some of it's the hardship and some of it's the good. And like right now we're going through the hardship and this should end in like 2028 or whatever.
Right.
And then, our generation depends on the role that we play. And then this repeats itself is the gist of it. It was just very confusing. And so I didn't do a lot of research and get into it. But it might be worth checking out if people are interested in this and the cycle and the thought that things do repeat itself.
Right.
I had a history teacher that I will never forget in his classroom. He had a big banner up across the entire, top, by the ceiling. And it said, "Those who fail history are condemned to repeat it."
That's true.
Yeah, it's true. I think
in a lot
about
of strange
that.
ways. But even with, we didn't get much into this about music and how styles come and go and fashion, and you see things repeat themselves. Like we went from the 50s to having quartet and quintet kind of Motown singing groups to that essentially going away in the 70s and 80s to the singers became the musicians themselves.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in the 80s we're reintroduced to these boy band type of theme again. When I heard kind of the grunge era come back, to me that didn't strike me as something new. It struck me as a revisiting of like that 70s kind of rock,
right.
Arena type rock is what it felt like. So these are all, you could call them fads, you could call them change, cycles, whatever. I tend to think there's a fine line between honoring the past, but limiting ourselves to the future.
Yeah.
So are we limiting our evolution as a species by honoring the past too much?
That's true.
Valid but point. At the same time, most of music that I love is all emulating something that these people have experienced in the past.
Right.
And so we tend to want, out of respect to want to emulate some of the things in the past.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah.
But there is a fine line of when is it not original?
Yeah, for
or
sure.
when are you harming yourself by not being willing to evolve?
Right, for sure.
So,
very valid points.
I don't know. It's a weird,
I feel you. I get
deep
it.
thought.
I smell what you're cooking.
Yeah. But anyways, that's all I'll say.
Hey.
Well, before we say goodbye to everybody, you want to share your page?
Yes, you can find me on the web, SamanthaJonesPsychicMedium.com. And if you would like to reach us, you can email us at spiritualjoneses@gmail.com. And you, sir?
Thank you. Yes, for my art, djonesartcollection.com for the web, at djonesartcollection for Instagram and Facebook. For the music, gypsybrown.com for the web, at gypsybrownmusic for Instagram, and at gypsybrownband for Facebook. And that's it for me.
Yay.
Cool. Well, we hope everybody got something out of this week.
That we do.
We didn't twist your mind too much. But
my mind's all twisted, but that's okay. It's a different story.
I did anyways. But we hope everybody has a great week.
That we do.
And until next week, peace and love.